Happy Halloween, everybody. It's Aaron Christensen of Horror 101 with Dr. AC, and welcome back to Scare-A-Thon 2024, benefiting the Women's Reproductive Rights Assistance Project. Today, we're going to be talking about A Quiet Place Day 1, came out earlier this year, and it is a prequel to A Quiet Place and A Quiet Place Part 2, directed by John Krasinski. As you may recall, in those movies, aliens have invaded the Earth, and they are armed with super sensitive hearing, and so they can track you down and shred you. So you got to be very, very quiet. Well, this being the prequel and day 1, it's presumably the day that the aliens arrive. And so expectations might be that we might learn a little something about how these aliens came to Earth, or how they came to be, or what they're doing here, what they're looking for, anything at all. We don't actually get any information. We just get more alien attacks. And the biggest difference is that we get a change of scenery rather than being in a remote kind of farmland, countryside area where the other films were set. Here we are set right in the thick of NYC, New York City, the Big Apple, where things are really, really loud all the time. Lupita N'yongo plays a very abrasive and angry cancer patient who seems to be on her last legs. She is in hospice, and she's really annoyed with everybody. The hospice center is set outside of the city. She agrees to go into town to see a show in exchange for the fact that she gets to have pizza in the city at one of her favorite places. That's the deal she makes with her hospice nurse, who's played by Alex Wolff of Hereditary, who has grown up quite a bit. So they go into town, they see what turns out to be a marionette show, a rather beautifully performed one, albeit, and she decides she's going to go out and get her pizza, and just then the aliens attack, and we basically see what looks like kind of a meteor storm, and then everything just goes bananas. And whenever there's huge destruction set in New York City, we can't help but inevitably think of September 11, 2001, 9/11. And that is absolutely true here with the dust and the destruction. Our minds immediately go back to that day. And there are some really impressive scenes of carnage, but then everything quiets down. You see where I'm going with this. And then it's time for everybody to be really, really quiet to avoid being detected by the monsters and, you know, killed. It's a pretty engaging opening. It's about 14 minutes, and then we get our title card. But then things slow down a bit, and then it basically becomes a story of a dying woman whose last wish is to go find her favorite pizza place and have a slice before she dies. As you can imagine, the emotional stakes are not terribly, terribly high there. It's not like the first film where Emily Blunt and John Krasinski are fighting to keep their family alive. Lupita N'yongo has a service cat that she walks around on a leash. I suspect several of these cat scenes were CGI, although what do I know? And then she crosses paths with a character named Eric, who's played by Joseph Quinn, and he is just a mess. This guy is terrified. He's not even supposed to be in New York. He's an Englishman, and he decides to start following her around. She tells him to get away. He doesn't go away. And from this uneasy place, we basically get a little mini road movie of the two of them trying to get across New York. Because if you recall, the aliens can't swim, so they need to get to the boats and then go out to an island somewhere. The funny thing is that we get these announcements, presumably from like a police helicopter, saying, you have to be quiet, and they can't swim. And it's kind of like, how did you find all this out so quickly to be able to disseminate this information? Did you watch the other movies? If it seems like I'm a little down on this movie, it's because it's okay. I feel like a lot more could have been mined from this scenario. And it feels like the only reason to have made this movie is to be able to show what would it be like if this happened in an urban setting. Lupita N'yongo and Joseph Quinn have just met, and he's a pretty annoying character, I gotta say. He is just like trembling like a leaf the entire time, and he holds his flashlight weird. It really bugged me. Since when does everybody hold their flashlight like a tactical weapon and just move it around like that? Like most people walk around like this, like it's a flashlight. They're not looking along like, I mean, just been, oh, and there's another point where he's kind of like holding it almost like a weapon, like he's like bracing it like a gun. I'm like, dude, you've been watching way too much TV. Yeah, these two characters, they barely know each other. And I know we've seen this before, but like this alliance is formed and they're willing to risk everything for each other. And I mean, maybe it's because, hey, this is the only other person in the world. I got to stick with him. But it feels like A, she's sick, and B, He's a coward, so these are not necessarily the best folks to be together. Also, all she wants is her pizza. If I'm Eric and I want to survive, I'm going to attach myself to somebody who wants to live and wants to get out of Manhattan. Our director is Michael Sarnoski, and his previous film was Pig, starring Nicolas Cage. And that was a film that had some genuine surprises in it. It's a small and quiet film. Haha, maybe that's why he got the job. Deem, who also shows up in Quiet Place Part 2, he has a small cameo here. And Sarnoski also provided the screenplay based on the characters created by Brian Woods and Scott Beck. They are a screenwriting team. They also have directed a couple of films. They directed the Adam Driver dinosaur movie 65, as well as the low-budget horror film Haunt. And they also lent their writing talents to the upcoming Hugh Grant movie Heretic, as well as the Rob Savage film Boogeyman, based on the Stephen King story. This is a well-produced movie. Unfortunately, I think it's a little too art-directed, and for a movie about being quiet, it's really loud. The sound effects are loud, the score is loud, everything feels very loud, and there's a lot of talking. I'm kind of like, the whole premise is that we don't talk. You have to be quiet. And what's also a bit of a bummer is that these aliens, we've seen them for 3 movies now, and yet I couldn't tell you what these aliens actually look like. I mean, in the movie, obviously, I know, hey, that's an alien. But if you told me to draw an alien from A Quiet Place, I'd be like, can't help you. Sorry. So outside of its strong beginning, the movie is a little bit of a disappointment. I genuinely liked the first one, even though, you know, the logic police kept phoning and being like, excuse me, how did they fill that grain elevator without making any noise? But I was willing to go along with it. I thought it was an original premise. And the sequel was pretty decent as well. My friend Daniel Milhouse and I talked about it a couple of years ago for a Scare-A-Thon. But this one just doesn't feel like it has enough going for it. I'm happy to see Lupita N'yongo continuing to work. And it's nice to see her in a starring role since her turn in Us with Jordan Peele. I just wish she'd had a stronger movie to star in. So that is A Quiet Place Day 1. And this is Scare-A-Thon 2024, benefiting the Women's Reproductive Rights Assistance Project. Today is the final day of October. However, if you're coming to this later and you're thinking, oh, I missed the deadline, fear not, the donation platform will stay active for several months. So please make a donation today and make a difference for these women in need. I'll be back in a couple days with our Scare-A-Thon 2024 wrap-up. And until then, happy Halloween and trick or treat.